Hank Schrader has one of the most interesting reputations throughout the entire Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul universe. Likely due to the lasting impact of his character, he's often lauded as the true hero of the series, as a morally righteous man, and generally he seems to be viewed as truly upstanding by a significant portion of the fanbase, at least from what I've seen. And that's always puzzled me because the show holds nothing back in directly opposing the idea that he is this paragon of virtue. By my reckoning, he's praised as this hero not necessarily because he actually is one, but rather because in comparison to our monster of a protagonist, most people would seem like one, with their flaws dwarfed and diminished in comparison and their positives accentuated. Yet despite his horrifying death, Hank should not be put on this lofty pedestal because it genuinely misrepresents the type of man he was. He was capable of heroics, but overall he was never a hero, and romanticizing him as one just isn't productive. At the end of the day, despite his failings, he did catch Heisenberg. And despite how things went down from there, that should be looked at as an achievement of a regular person, not that of a hero. Not just because of the lesson that regular people can ultimately do good and significant things, but simply because that's who he is.
Why should you be the one who pays for doing the right thing?
Oh, baby, it wasn't the right thing. It's not what the job is. It's supposed to be better than that. I've been unraveling, what I did to Pinkman. That's not who I'm supposed to be. That's not me. I'm just not the man I thought I was.
As he says here halfway through the series, he's not the type of man he should be, partly due to his experiences in Season 2. He is ashamed of some of the monstrous things he's capable of, and the charges not being pressed on him for his beatdown of Jesse gives him a new lease on life to become that man that he can be proud of. He wanted to do better, to be good, and he began making strides towards that eventually, but things got worse before they got better, and then they subsequently got much, much worse. It's tragic, but it's the truth. Hank resolved to be better, and then was attacked, crippled, thrown into a horrible depression, regained that spark for his case, and began being the man that he wanted to be, and then was ground to dust through numerous failures that wore him down to nothing. When he finally stumbled upon the truth, it tore him and his family apart, and he made headstrong decisions every step of the way out of pride, obsession, and personal wounds. Now, of course, heroes can have flaws, and plenty of heroes do. But for me, for one to be a hero, those flaws have to be overpowered by immense good that shifts the balance, and a nobility in intent and sentiment. And Hank just doesn't have that. He has good and admirable traits that gain him momentum, but they don't overpower the bad to an extent that would make him anything more than a regular person. And so many of his deeds that would seem great in a vacuum are done for reasons that are centered on pride, ego, and selfishness, so I can't really look at them as heroic. I can see an argument for him being probably, maybe the closest thing that the main cast has to a hero, I guess, but he's still so far off that it makes the conversation seem redundant. Naturally, Hank does many fantastic things throughout the series. He's a great uncle to Walt Jr. sometimes, and a loving family man. He acts extremely admirably and genuinely throughout the series at times through showing care for others and through trying to do what's right and good. But despite those aspirations, he is never able to become a great man. He was just a man. He exudes toxic macho masculinity and sexist undertones at times. He completely demeans Wendy in front of Walter Jr. He is absolutely horrible to Marie when she's trying to support and comfort him, which was understandable given the context but still awful. He lets her get away with shoplifting due to his connections. He is crass and rude and jokes about dead bodies. He lets his anger get the better of him and beats Jesse to within an inch of death. And even after significant growth, he shows a complete lack of empathy for Jesse's story about him and Walt. He is fully willing to sacrifice Jesse's life to catch Walt as part of his crusade, and arguably most prominently, his quest to stop Heisenberg gradually shifts from something that was part of the job that needed to be done because it was what was right, into something Hank needs to do for himself. It becomes personal to him, and it morphs into this obsession that ultimately becomes something he needs to do to quote-unquote win. After finding out that Walt was Heisenberg, the smart thing to do would have been to give that information over to the DEA. Walt was known to be an extremely dangerous man capable of all sorts of terrible, violent deeds, and so turning him in immediately, even if it would lose him his job, would have been the proper thing to do. But instead, Hank prolongs it and pursues this himself, because he wants this personal glory and he wants this victory. Catching Walt is an admirable ambition in, like I said, a vacuum, but Hank didn't want to do it for the benefit of others, or even because he wanted Walt to be apprehended. He did it because he needed to be the one that caught Walt. Breaking Bad so often hones in on how immense pride can be such a deadly flaw. Through Walt's entire journey, through Gus's downfall, and through many other threads throughout the series, and Hank is no different.
I'll go in there. I'm bringing proof, not suspicions. I can be the man who caught him.
Hank is characterized by his lax, happy-go-lucky attitude and wisecracks and for being exuberant and larger than life. But by the end, his obsession with Heisenberg destroyed him from the inside out. He would approach his earlier cases and even the earlier bits of the Heisenberg case with a fervor and energy. But by the end, he's just sick of it all. It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's not gratifying or fulfilling. It's a need. He has resolved to do this, but it chains him down, haunts him, and makes him miserable. And once he reaches a certain point, it becomes overwhelming and scary. At this point in his life, he can look back on jobs that he thought were shitty with rose-tinted glasses and indulge in the innocence, where he didn't feel this obligation to chase something that terrified him. This isn't a hero, this is simply a man, driven by obsession and pride into oblivion by the storm that is Heisenberg.
Been thinking about this summer job I used to have. Back in college, I'd spend my days marking trees in the woods with this orange spray can. Every day, I'd go back, hiking, pick up where I left off.
Sounds nice, being out in the woods all day.
No, it wasn't so great. I got sunburn, there were mosquitoes. Just wanted to make a few bucks, buy beer. I've been thinking about that job more and more lately. Maybe I should have enjoyed it more. Tagging trees is a lot better than chasing monsters.
Obviously, I'm not saying that there is nothing within him that wants to catch Walt for more righteous reasons, but the dominant force within him is that same dominant force that took hold within his brother-in-law. And I did lay out a bunch of his personal flaws, but please note that I'm not at all trying to portray him as completely awful. Is he capable of admirable heroism? Sure. But he is just as capable of deep darkness, and he is as powerful a demonstration as anything else in the show that pride and ego are so often our greatest enemies. His is a sad story of a regular, flawed man who loses himself in the wake of a devil, who becomes a shadow of himself and is ultimately destroyed, pushed on by this impulse. He is the everyman in some ways, showing the duality of regular people, being a simultaneous piece of encouragement and a stern warning as well. We can be capable of both immense good and immense iniquity, and we are capable of becoming so fixated on things that they drive us to the edge and make us forget what is right in service of what we feel we must do. Hank Schrader is a wonderful character, not due to being this idealized hero that some portray him as, but because he is thoroughly, for better or worse, exactly who he is. Many thanks for watching.